Okay.
Hey, LEC community. Actually, I would say hey, coalition community, because this is a collaborative effort. How's everyone doing today? Katina,
I
Erica?
cannot complain.
I am doing really well today.
Yeah. I'm noticing some new energy coming to the forefront. I want to touch base on that a little bit.
Mommy and Daddy got married. Yeah, it's our anniversary. We're going to Colorado, to the mountains, to a beautiful place.
Somebody got married, and I'm excited for them.
Right? I'm like, what happened?
Right.
So, Katina,
And why did I know about it?
I want to go for a snack.
Katina, what are we talking about today as we're holding space for educators of color?
Oh my God. So today, let me pull it up to make sure I said exactly the way I was told to say it.
Really?
So our topic today is how do we influence the culture of institutions so that they reflect the needs of our children? So that is our topic today. How do we build culture? Because I think we talk a lot about culture, but are we really building it? And are we really building it with the right people in mind?
You think at this view?
That becomes the question.
I think
Remember yesterday we had that travel vlog where I talked about traveling?
I think a lot of people are actually
before you have kids, look, this is me and Jenny's entire bag. That's all.
I don't know
what this is all at this bag. We got shirts, we got diapers.
You guys,
It's not my house, I promise.
I know.
I think I found the source. It's all good. Before we even talk about community building, can we just acknowledge the fact that we are in a new place of grace? I feel like
we are. Yes.
I think as everyone continues to navigate, we're going to go into our second month of isolation, self-quarantine, hopefully self-quarantine, even though I noticed some protesters out there today.
Man, but here's the interesting thing about protesters. So they're protesting that their civil liberties are being violated because they have to stay at home, and that this is not a real thing, but they actually go out with masks on. So either it's real or it's not. Like, what are you really saying? I'm not following.
Just in case it is, just in case you might get sick, right? But forbid the fact that, I had to stay inside of my house. And I understand, isolation can be really tricky for some folks.
Yeah.
But I just hope that, that they don't get sick. And I hope that we're able to continue to flatten this curve, because obviously whatever we're doing is working right now. Hopefully in Kansas City for sure.
Yes, definitely in Kansas City. I think I saw an update that where we were having several new cases each day. That's kind of like one. I think the other day was one new case. So that's a great thing. I'm happy by that. At the same time, it's like, man, we've lost a number of people across the country, and we can't forget about that. I know I had sick relatives. Other people have had sick relatives. Some people, like I said, have passed away. And so we want to be mindful of that. Even if it didn't touch your family, I think it's important that we acknowledge what has happened, for sure.
I got to say, there's unfortunately a lot of friends on my timelines that are dealing with this in a very close way in their family. And so my energy, my thoughts, my prayers go out with them. And if whatever we can do, we're absolutely here to be supportive. And so feel free to let us know as we continue. But back to a much more interesting and heated conversation around building culture and making sure that the cultures that we build reflect all voices, particularly those of Black and Brown students. I hear that's an easy thing to do. I hear that's incredibly easy to get done, particularly in current environments as they stand.
You think? Who's saying it? Because I want to see him do it.
Right. I find, I think it's easy to do in the classroom. It's easier to do in your classrooms when you are able to navigate and be, the head honcho in your classroom and set the tone and the climate in your classroom. I think a lot of us, we sit in meetings, we talk about the things that we're supposed to do and things that we need to do. And then We go to our classrooms, we close the door, and then we make it happen in the way that it needs to happen. But then outside those doors, those four walls, it just doesn't happen the way it does in the classroom. And what is interesting is that we create a climate and a culture within our classrooms that supports all of our children, not just Black and brown children.
Right.
They all thrive and they all do extremely well. However, coming outside of the classroom is where the real struggle really happens.
I'm going to give some pushback on that though, because I don't think even within the classrooms that it's working for all kids. I think just like we teach to the middle, we often will set up a culture or a classroom climate that works with the kids or works for the kids we most closely identify with. And that can be a problem too, because we're not taking into consideration all of the kids as a whole. And so if I'm Black, I could also, be guilty of it. A person of color can be guilty of it just like anybody else. And so what we identify with is what we, kind of gravitate toward. And we have to be really intentional and purposeful about incorporating, acknowledging, respecting, learning about, and engaging in a way that honors all of those kids. Because I've had students that were from Australia or from, Paris and things like that. And I really had to okay, how do I incorporate some of the things that they value, be it language, be it the way they do math, art, whatever, song, food, whatever. How do I incorporate all of those things to really make sure I'm building a relationship with these students so that they know that I care about them and I want the best for them, and that I'm genuine in what I say when I talk about building a real solid culture and environment for them to thrive.
I appreciate that sentiment. I think about the work starts with us, right? And so when we're looking at overcoming biases, when we're looking at overcoming our own journey with our own cultural identity and how we show up and how we present to the world, we absolutely have to put in the work, and we have to do the work ourselves. Because I think about my experiences growing up in Miami, surrounded by an entire Latino community, and then moving to a place like Spokane, Washington, where that community was less, and then moving to a place like Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where that community was almost non-existent, right?
Non-existent, yes.
And so I think about my own journey around adopting those narratives that other communities had of my own community. I think about me being Nicaragüense, my parents are from Nicaragua, but I think from 6th grade on, I was considered Mexican, right? Like all these other things that you have to work through, and then you don't want to bring into the classroom. And so, but I appreciate that call out, because I think it really we have to do the work around race and equity. We have to understand where we show up on these principles in order for us to start truly building communities which reflect all of our views and values and positions, particularly those of students.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, I spoke of language and food and music and art, those are sometimes easy to incorporate. But when you start getting down into the nitty gritty of why does a particular culture or group of people have a particular mindset, or what do they deem to be respectful versus disrespectful, or those types of things, there kind of some depth under those, and they're tied to certain experiences. So that requires us to go deeper than just pulling a book off the shelf and having characters to represent those kids. And I think we're not having those deep conversations where it pushes us to critically think about culture and environment in classrooms and in the larger school and community conversation, really in those spaces. And I just was on the phone today with an African-American woman on the East Coast, and 95% of the community where she lives is Black, but they are struggling there because of the socioeconomic divide. And so we don't think about the religious piece, the socioeconomic piece, and some of those other things that we also need to be, thinking about, again, when we're talking about engaging in this culture work, Hey, there's Cornell. Got that amplified.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, hello.
How's it going?
It's going great. It's going great. I did want to see. I saw that Hurston had been in the live comments, and he said when we first started talking about people being out and protesting that the mask for many were to conceal their identity. It was not about them being
Safe.
sick or safe. And I wanted to like say kudos to that because we can think on the one hand it's about safety and not being sick, but on the other hand, is this a modern day Klan road? We have to ask ourselves that, a way in which to conceal our identity while we're doing things that are not supportive of the community.
I appreciate that sentiment, and I think he goes on to kind of explain Hurston. It feels like we're being forced to realize, we're on a different topic, but he feels like we're being forced to realize what many educators have known for a while: schooling and education are not the same thing.
So true. True.
Back to the
Schooling
original.
is assembly line work.
Back to the original.
I think about Henry Ford, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Edgar.
No, I was going to say, actually, I'm going to bring in Susanna, one of our LEC members as well. Hey, Susanna.
Hey.
Yes. Hey, Susanna.
Hello.
Hey, girl. Hey. Sorry, like clicking the Zoom link is now second nature, so I was on Zoom waiting for y'all.
Well, we are glad you have gotten to the right spot for sure. Yes.
I'm happy to be here.
No, but I was going to say.
Go ahead, Edgar. I'm sorry.
No. Back to Hurston's comment around the mask or to conceal identities, and first of all, the depth of that statement is incredible, right? But I also think about all the masks that we currently wear, particularly as we try to build culture, as we try to build community, and what masks are we willing to take off versus what masks are we unwilling to kind of take off in order to be our best selves.
I think that we have to take a mile off. We have to strip away the layers because that's where like authenticity lives. And I just was interviewing someone yesterday, and we were talking about gifted and talented students. And in the midst of that interview, he got extremely vulnerable, raw, and kind of talked about his own lived experiences. And that's what draws people into you. I think that's what builds relationship, is when you start to kind of shed those masks and those layers. It's almost like peeling an onion, And so you and I were on the same kind of wavelength when I thought about the mask. I was like, man, and we're wearing them every day too, because it's about perception. It's about fear. It's about the unknown. And then that's hard work to shed those layers, because I think, some of us, those masks become our foundation. So if you tear them away, it's like tearing down the foundation. Well, what do you have to stand on after that?
Yeah, but I think it's important also to understand that you are wearing a mask, because when you have been conditioned, and your belief systems have been influenced. And so you only know what you know. And until you are ready to see beyond those masks, you're going to wear them. And it's hard work. Like, to show up as your authentic self, if you haven't done the work to even figure out who that is and what that means, you're going to constantly present, and even when you know you're wearing a mask, like you said, it takes courage, and then in what space and to what capacity, it's big work, it's hard work, and it takes an extreme amount of courage, particularly in certain spaces. So, I think I agree with the notion that we have to look at ourselves first and evaluate ourselves first, and then figure out, what mask am I wearing? What these thoughts, where did they come from? Are they only solely cultural, social economics, all of those things, because so much we are made of so many things and comprised of so many experiences. So, I think we really have to be intentional, and we have to pay attention and figure out, because showing my authentic self in one space is something different in another, when it shouldn't be.
Okay, I'm glad you tacked that onto the end. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, when it shouldn't be. But but you're thinking, you have to think about that. It's like, when I'm in this space, then I'm this way, and when I'm in this space, I'm in that space that way. Now, certainly, I'm not going to go to church and act like I do in the club. However, I still should show up as myself authentically, and if I don't, then I need to figure out what's happening.
If I can add to that, so I think this is a shout out to Carmita Seman, the founder of Surge Institute. I heard her at a conference when they talk about authenticity as a new mask that we all wear, that we take on, take off, depending on where we are. And so she really, I think her point, I think I'm probably doing a terrible injustice to it, but really around the idea that like who we are at the moment that we are, when we are, is exactly who we are, right? That is who we are in that space. That is who we are authentically during that time in that period. And so you're right. Who I am at the club is different than who I am at church, in the way that I express myself. But my core beliefs, my core thoughts, the essence of who I am is consistent in each of those spaces. And so I think it's a really interesting, distinction to talk about. Like how we act in certain environments isn't how authentic we are, and when in fact it really is authentic to who we are, like how comfortable we are in those environments to show up in the ways we do.
Yeah. And now the question becomes, how do you build that in the framework of a school or a community, a neighborhood association, wherever? How do you build that so that when people come into that space, they feel honored, they feel connected, they feel inspired? I think that is the question before us. Like, how do we begin to build that? Because what we know is not happening. Erica, I or Susanna, even, I will put that question to you guys. Like, have you seen it done well? Is it easy work? How do we start? Where do we begin?
I think I was looking through my Amplify notes and my Surge notes because it made me think of something. But as a person of color, if you're going to bring your full authentic self into a school system and into an educational system, you either, I think, have to have one of two things. Number one, you better have an army, or like some people who are backing you up. Or number two, you just better be strong as hell. And the reason why I say that is because I'm speaking from experience, where I come from the neighborhood where I teach, and I grew up in the neighborhood where I teach. And you would think that that authenticity is prime, right? Like knowing a lot of the situations. Knowing a lot of the situations that my kiddos are going through, knowing what the neighborhood looks like, knowing what a lot of the culture looks like. But when you have people that come into our school systems that want to change the demographics of our neighborhoods, that want to change what the culture in our neighborhoods are, that think that our neighborhoods are bad and that our kids should aspire to leave them, they're going to put you in that box as well, right? Like you are part of the bad.
Yeah.
So I think my answer to the question is that I don't give a damn what they think. It's the work that we do for our kids, right? And for our families and for our communities. But you have to really know that if your authentic self is going to show up, it's going to have to be rooted in what's best for kids and what's best for that community. Mm-hmm. And a lot of time it's going to come with pushback. And so, unfortunately, we have to defend ourselves, right? And we have to defend the decisions that we make, and we have to defend the ways that we talk, or the things that we do. But if your work is for the kids and for the community that you're working for, it's kind of like it's the bullet you're gonna take. I don't know how to get better,
Yeah, I agree with you. I can't I can't deny that. And I'm glad you said you either got to come with an army or you got to be tough as nails. And so I guess I came tough as nails.
There you go.
So to speak, but you do receive pushback. And I think the most like I expect certain pushback, but I think it's most painful as an educational professional when the people that are pushing back are people that look like you, the families that you're trying to serve. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were on the same page. But it goes directly to what Erica and Edgar said about the assimilation, living in the matrix, so to speak. They swallowed the pill. They bought into this notion of the American dream. We've all talked about that. Does it really exist? And so then they're pushing against. And it's kind of the same thing I was saying about the conversation I was having with a woman this morning. That's where they're having the challenges is with each other. And I think we talk about others a lot, but I don't think we often have conversations about how we deal with and engage with each other. People that look like us, people that came from the same neighborhood.
Sorry, go ahead, Edgar.
I was going to say, there's a lot of hurt and pain that comes along with that, right? Because I think that, one, we have to acknowledge that as Black and brown folks in the ways that we navigate this world, like there's all these expectations that society has of us, good or bad, good and bad, I should say. And, I think of it from a Latinx perspective, right? We as a community come from 32, 33 different Latin American countries, right? We've been here long, we've been here a short period of time. We are conservative, we're liberal, we're all over the spectrum. And so to think that we are all united on certain issues is to also paint this with like a big wide brush, which completely ignores all of our different perspectives. One thing that I always think about in terms of how we unite our community is under this concept of Nepantla, which means in between. This idea of like, we're not from here, we're not from there. And I think that is a commonly shared experience amongst like Latinx communities, but not everybody's willing to have those conversations because it does come with a lot of, like work that you need to work through on healing and accepting what has happened, understanding those challenges, those narratives, and like having to show up. And so, I mean, it's the hardest when it's your own community that's pushing against you. Mm-hmm. And I will say this, and I'll say this on camera because like it is what it is. I expect that from white folks, but when it happens to me from members of my own community, I'm like, it breaks my heart. It makes me question everything that I'm doing. And then I have to recenter and say, you know what? We are all impacted by white supremacist culture, right? We all swim in that water. And so sometimes you have to come up for a fresh breath of air and, like recenter on why we're doing this work.
Yeah.
That being said, with the white supremacy culture, one of the characteristics being power hoarding, right? We as people of color are like, there's not enough power to go around. This little bit I have, I'm gonna have to keep it for myself. I can't share this with other Latinos or other Latinx people because then they're gonna be on top, or they're going to be closer to whiteness than I am, or they're gonna be more accepted than I am. And in the first few years of my career, it just hurt my feelings. I was like, we're in this together, like I'm trying to do this with you. Why are we arguing? Why is this an issue? But man, when I learned this concept of power hoarding, it's like, we don't think there's enough power to go around for all of us, when really who has made the constraints on power, and why is it that we are, accepting and adhering to those constraints?
Man, you said something right there. We've been socialized or conditioned to believe that it's only like y'all brown people, y'all only gonna get this part of the pie. Black people, y'all only gonna get this, and then everything else is left for us. And then we buy into that, and so because we buy into it and we operate from that framework, then we start fighting each other. So it is very strategic and planned to operate that way. And so you hit the nail on the head. That power hoarding is something. It's like some leaders in the community, and we have another comment from Live. Said many of the decision makers and community leaders lack the cultural competency to manage the environment, and that's exactly it. I have to give up my money. I have to give up my title. I have to give up my position. I have to sacrifice something. And it's like, but did somebody sacrifice something for you? How dare you hold so tight to something and be unwilling to sacrifice because you've forgotten that somebody sacrificed for you. Like,
but also too, the education field is such a selfless field. You know, like if that's the way you want, if you're in this work to be recognized, then you're probably not in this work for the right reasons. If you're in this work for somebody to pat you on the back and to tell you that you're doing a good job, you're probably not doing this work for the right reasons, and you're probably not going to be successful.
So let me ask this though, because I think that there's room for all of us to do great things and be recognized. I don't want to take that away from anybody in this space. If I see a Miss Gibbs who's new in her leadership role, I want to be able to be a cheerleader for her, but that doesn't mean that I can't be a cheerleader for somebody else. And because I'm cheerleading for her doesn't minimize who I am in my own right.
Absolutely.
We should be able to be champions. I ain't saying that should be your why. Now, I don't think that should be our why. Yeah. But I certainly want to acknowledge professionals that are doing great things no matter where we find them.
And where does that acknowledgement come from, right? Or like, how are you seeking out that acknowledgement? Or are you seeking it out at all? Right? Like you're putting together a scenario where people are acknowledging Erica for the work that she's doing, not necessarily her turning around and looking for the acknowledgement or like seeking it out in some kind of physical way.
Yeah.
But as we talk about building cultures, I think acknowledgement is so key, particularly to retaining educators and to building that culture where, students are seeing themselves reflected in that space. And so I think it's really disappointing and saddening that, we have educators out in our community today that don't feel acknowledged, that don't feel seen, that don't feel heard, and that still go and show up every day and, do their best for the kids that they serve. And so part of building culture, to Katina's earlier question around like, how do we do this? We have to show that. I say this all the time and I get a little feedback about it, but I'm gonna say it again. We have to love on our teachers. We have to love on our educators. We have to make sure that they feel special. And I honestly hope that COVID-19, particularly when all of our kids are back at home with us, and now we have to learn how to be teachers and do the work ourselves. Like, I hope that we realize what teachers actually do on the day-to-day, and that we can come together as a community moving forward to say, hey, appreciate the work that you do. Let's create some advocacy. Let's increase your salaries. Let's do all this other stuff that you have deserved for years, but we just haven't gotten our stuff together to do that. So I think acknowledgement is absolutely key in that culture and building a culture that retains educators who look like us.
I agree. And let me shout you out while we're talking about that. I hope I can say it. So one of the things that I know that LEC is doing is taking the time out to do care packages for educators and things like that during this time. That small thing goes a long way. A lot of people like the big public, displays of affection and accolades and all of those things. I am one of those people, like, it's the smallest thing sometimes, and just like, it'll tear me up. And so the fact that we, as an organization, we have said that this is something that is important, and I still hear you, see you, and know that you need while you're continuing to give, that's awesome. And it's supported by research. Educators of color, education professionals of color lead the profession. One of the main reasons why is because they are not acknowledged. They are not lifted up. They are not respected. And so I'm just shouting you guys out for doing that. I talked to Erica today. I said, hey, Erica's showing out. What we got to do? I'm like, hey, we think about so much, So that's what it put it on my radar screen. Hey, you need to make sure that you all are doing the same type of things, so that we multiply our impact.
I gotta say, and this is a shout out to educators all around. The folks that we have given those micro grants to, $25, which I think Susanna and I initially were like, that's not enough, but it's what we can do. And we were a little concerned that it might be insulting, or there's a lot of just concerns there in general. Yeah. But the one thing that's really been heartening, so we gave our educators the opportunity to use the $25 for either students, classrooms, or self-care. Self-care being important because we understand that being an educator is incredibly difficult and challenging. And so self-care actually is a retention strategy. And the majority of our educators are choosing to use that money on better connecting with students, downloading apps. They're writing I miss you notes to students, so they've purchased stationery with that and sending that out to their students. And, so it's been really heartwarming to see, but also to Cornell's point around the selflessness makeup of educators, that even when they have the opportunity to spend money on themselves directly, they're typically going to try to find ways to do it for the families or the kids that they serve.
But I mean, isn't this also what we're saying too, that they probably are needing something that they don't have, right? And the fact that the educators are coming down to a place where during this time they're having to purchase their own software, purchase their own licensing, or their school districts or their schools aren't taking care of whatever needs they have, is one of the bottom line issues that we're getting to right now, right? Of teachers not being valued, of not getting the resources, of not being heard and seen like they should. So yeah, I also want to applaud you, Edgar. That's a really, really awesome initiative. Keep it up.
And we got another comment, and someone's like, kudos to Edgar. Love does need to come from the system they serve as well. How do we do that? And is it Delia? Hopefully I said the name right. Yep. Delia. Okay. I hate to butcher people's names. But how do we do that? I think we demand it. And I'm not saying come in kicking and screaming, but at some point, and I don't understand how we've gotten to a place where we're so fearful to just say, you know what, we deserve this, and this is what we expect. And so this is what we need you to do. Leadership. And really and truly, all you're doing is calling them to task to stand on what they say they believe in, as it relates to the educational professionals that are in their care, as well as the students and the families. Because if we don't have whole, complete, cared for staff, faculty, the students and the families don't get served. So, go ahead.
You know what I think gets lost in when we're thinking about teachers is the humanity, right? I think our administration districts, on a grand scale of a system, we forget the humanity that's behind educators, that's behind teachers, right? And this is not an easy job. And anybody who I encourage to come into this field and into teaching job, I'm going to let them know, hey, this is not an easy job. But if your calling and your passion is to educate people, that's not fair for us to take away the humanity from that person. Just because I'm serving little people and I'm serving my community doesn't mean I should be served less, right? It's almost like, well, you're in charge of all these people, and so kind of deal with it or figure it out. I think we just forget how human teachers are, right? I think parents forget how human teachers are. Kids, you hear kids all the time, do you sleep here? Or they see you at the store and it's weird, it's just a innate thing that we do, is forget that educators are human.
And I think that goes directly to the whole conversation around culture. We had a culture shift because educators stopped living in the communities that they serve. So then they became almost like these mythical people, these superheroes that came in and delivered these lessons or provided this instruction, and then they disappeared. But when you leave in the community, I applaud you for doing it, and Erica for doing it, myself and Cornell. Like, we live amongst the people. And so it's like, absolutely not. We're not, did I lose y'all? Y'all there?
Hello? Oh, okay.
Okay, I was like, I don't see y'all. Where y'all at?
I'm here. No.
We were speaking too much truth.
But yeah, there's another live comment that says we also must push through the mentality that those who can do teach. This current situation is teaching, ironically, many that the adage is not only false but also proven damaging to the education system. Kirsten, can you expound on that a little bit more? That was so intellectual. So help me with that. Break it down like a third grader.
Have y'all heard that sentiment before?
Sure.
That those who do and those who can't teach.
Yeah.
And those who can't teach gym.
Oh Lord, that's horrible.
Wow.
I remember I said that in front of my mother one time, and she and I was a young kid, so I was just kind of repeating what I had heard. My mother's been a physical education teacher for 30 years, and I'll never forget it because I could tell that she was legitimately hurt by that hurtful comment, that of minimizing teachers and not only teachers, but physical education teachers and fitness and nutrition and health, right? And the kind of things, right, where Katina, you're right. We've seen the culture shift from what is the purpose, right? Maybe we don't value teachers anymore because deep down we know we ain't really educating kids, right?
But
because deep down we know that our educational experience wasn't really worth it. Our educational experience didn't really do anything for us, right? And so although we're educators and we know we're going back trying to change the system, the status quo or the assumption may be that we're just there perpetuating the same system that's already been there, right? And I think that hopefully, I don't know no teachers perpetuating a status quo.
There are some.
Yes.
That's powerful.
I
stay away from them.
I can say this, especially being new to admin, just having come out of the classroom, not even a whole year ago, and understanding what teachers need to feel valued and appreciated. I think because for the most part, most of us, we buy our classrooms. At the end of the year, I know every year packing up my classroom, there was literally a small table of things that belonged to the school. And there were, 6, 7, 8, 10 totes that belonged to me that I had to take home. When it comes to snacks and all these things, because clearly the budget doesn't afford them and we've got to make sure. So all the sacrifices that teachers make for the sake of our students, and coming in, what I could do for my team was to let them know how valuable they are and how appreciated they are. And it wasn't all, I would, try to, provide a lunch or whatever, but every day they needed to see me at their door. I needed to be saying, good morning, I see you. If it got to a point to where, it was something, Ms. Gibbs, I need 15, take 15 if I could. All these things. And this is in the midst of me trying to figure out my job and my role, but understanding that it's hard to be in a classroom and teachers just want someone to acknowledge that at the very least. That's just a start. That's just a start. Yes, we absolutely need to be paid more. We absolutely, all these things. But what are the baseline things that I can do that doesn't cost anything to let them know that I am in this with them? So when we go out, and I can't remember some workshop or something, we talked about, being a united front and saying and partnering with parents. It was an Elements event, actually, now that it comes back to me, partnering with parents and having parents advocating for us as well. But really, having an administration that values me enough to at least acknowledge what I do on a daily basis, to show up, to say, good morning, I see you. Mm-hmm. Hey, you need a bathroom break? Go, take your time. Mm-hmm. You don't have to rush and get it done in 30 seconds. Those types of things, that's just a start, but it means
Can somebody
so
read
much.
it out loud for me? I can't get to read right now.
Oh, are you listening to Erica?
Oh, I can't hear Erica.
Oh, okay. He can't hear me. Oh, it's him today.
One thing, my question is, are classroom teachers the only ones required to sacrifice? What is your
Absolutely not.
thought?
Absolutely not. I can tell you that. And this is how many months have I been in admin? Absolutely not. As a leader, as a dean of primary, and being responsible for 15 staff and 200 some odd kids and their families, it's a great sacrifice. You sacrifice, the time you spend. I spend money out of my pocket making sure my staff is taken care of, and anything else with any other student in any class in any grade level, making sure that they have what they need when the teachers can't. The time that it takes for me to get my job done in its entirety in a day exceeds the number of hours that I have to work, and then it comes home. Then I'm up, with, I got to call in today. I need a sub. Oh, I can't get a sub either. I gotta shift my staff, or I gotta push in myself. So it doesn't end there. And I am learning that I didn't come out of the classroom. My classroom just got bigger. And I have more students. I have adult students and children and their families. So, the sacrifice is huge.
Erica, do you think that you would have that mindset or function in that way if your classroom experience? Because what I found is that today, in 2020, I have seen a lot of people come through non-traditional ways to enter the profession, and they move very quickly. So you've had 20 years almost of classroom experience before you ever thought about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, it has that shaped the way you think about making sacrifice. Versus someone else that may matriculate very, very quickly.
This is what I can say. And I said it before. Teaching isn't what I do, is who I am. And I think that's what drives me. So the need is a need, no matter where it is. I will say, having been in the classroom for 20 years and knowing what it takes to do that work, and deal with all the elements of the classroom, and then deal with exterior administration and what they don't get about being in the classroom, has helped me be in the position that I'm in a positive way. Excuse me, my daughter. But to say somebody coming in brand new who hasn't had that experience can't do that or doesn't understand the level of sacrifice and things like that, I cannot answer that. I don't know. I know it happens, and I certainly I've certainly been in situations and positions where I have a minimal support. It's almost as if, you're a teacher. This is what you signed up to do. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I'm a human being and I have a life. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important for admin to understand the components of the classroom and what it takes to do it. To understand that
whose responsibility, and this, I would love to hear Susanna and Cornell talk about this if possible, or Edgar chime in too. Whose responsibility is it to build culture? Whose responsibility is that?
It's the responsibility of higher ups of your organization. It's a top-down trickle effect. So from whoever the CEO or the principal or however your school is structured, if you're a hierarchically strategized organization, I think that in a lot of cases, I heard somebody say this earlier, is that education's kind of moved away from being education. I think we see that a lot in charter schools that have kind of moved into this like corporate business model where you have CEOs at the top and a very like stringent hierarchical model from top down, right? If that's your structure of your organization, then your culture has to come from top down. Mm-hmm. I prefer like a more lateral leadership structure, where in that case, it's everybody's job to build culture, right? It's a responsibility of everybody involved in the culture to create it, reinforce it, and perpetuate it on a daily basis. Otherwise, it's just something being prescribed to you, not something that you're actually living out.
Katina, earlier you talked about how teachers back in the day used to live in the neighborhoods they taught, right? I think, at least in my opinion, I think it's part of us educators' responsibility to either know or be comfortable with getting to know the community in which I teach. That being the teachers, that being the principals, anyone who's serving in the school or serving the kids of that community somehow has to work to better understand that community. Even me, I mean, I went to elementary school in the neighborhood in in the early 2000s or 1990, you know what I'm saying? Like, I need to know what the needs and the wants of my community is. And the reason why is because we all, as humans, come in with bias and stereotypes. What have you heard about the Northeast? What have you heard about a majority Latinx population? What have you heard about undocumented families, right? Those biases come with us. And so I think it's part of my responsibility, just like a business owner. When I'm getting ready to open up a business on Independence Avenue, and if we get one more dollar store in this neighborhood, I'm gonna scream. But if I'm about to open up a business on Independence Avenue, I need to make sure it's viable. How do I do that? I need to make sure that the community needs and wants it. They do research. They get to know the community, not necessarily in a good way, right? We know businesses that shouldn't be in the neighborhood or that are taking off, you know what I'm saying? But as an educator, I should take a survey of what it is that I'm going to serve, who it is I'm going to serve. I'm not going to be 100% capable of serving everyone at every moment. Either I don't speak the language, I can't speak on those topics or those concepts. I need to be comfortable with reaching out to my networks or the resources I do have to then serve that situation as best I can. I think that's the responsibility of anybody who's serving children and youth.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't necessarily think that the corporate culture is bad in and of itself. And I think that there are things that you learn from it. For me, it's like when I was designing Dreams KC and wanted to pilot that as a new school model here in the city, I spent a year talking to youth, not adults, no adults, from K-12 on. Then I start talking to the adults. Then I start talking to this next group of stakeholders. Then I start bringing them together to hash out where the differences were and things like that. And so I think, that's a model that can work. But one of the things that I think we neglect to do is to actually ask the community if we can operate in that space. We think of educational institutions as a given. But in this new environment where we have new schools springing up and things like that, who asked the community? Is this what you want? Is this what you need? Like you said, can we operate here in this way? And because we have a deficit mindset in regards to the people that we serve, we often think, and you heard me say we, that they don't know what they need or they don't know what's best for them. And I say that's a lie. And so everyone has to be a part of building this culture. And I love anybody that knows by now knows that I love Simon Sinek. And he talks about your why and how it has to be a part of every one of your senses. You have to smell it, you have to taste it, you got to hear it, you got to say it, you got to see it. That's how you build culture in an environment. And when you do that and you create the buy-in because the people around you buy into that why, then the vision emerges. And your why and your vision are very different.
Yeah.
I think as admin, Erica, I think you can speak to this, but as admin, once you decide that why for your culture, and really it has to be with that research, right? Not just like, oh, here I am, I don't know the community and here's my why. Now we're all going to adjust to it, right? After calculation, after research, after understanding what the community wants and needs, then the administration and people who are in charge of hiring then must say, hey, here's the mold that we're looking for, or not the mold, that's the wrong word, but here's our why, and these are our non-negotiables, and this is the way we're going to run the school. We are doing this because blank percent of people, blah, you know what I'm saying? Like all this research-based stuff, it's all out there. The research is out there of what works best for kids of color, what works best for English language learners, what works best for undocumented, right? All this research that's out there.
And then we have to say, if this isn't a good fit for you, we wish you the best.
Exactly.
It's not, we don't take it personal or anything. It's like choosing a mate. We're just not a good fit for one another.
Not gonna fit.
I gotta say though, a culture could sometimes be weaponized, and so some cultures are pre-built where they don't want differing opinions. I remember this from a trip to Houston where there was a charter school I was in, 99% Latino students, not one educator of color in the building. And when I asked the question, why, can't you find any educators of color? They're like, well, can't find them. Go on to the communities, they do what they do, but can't find them. And, you have to be a good culture fit. And so let's not forget that, cultures have to be flexible enough to increase the voices or elevate the voices of others, and to also be flexible enough to accept that, culture shift and change. And so it can go both ways depending on where we are. I know that Betsaida has a couple of comments. Inside of my classroom, I'm responsible for building the culture. I understand it fits for better of each of my sessions. And from one day to the other, the culture will be altered with the latest events that are happening in our community. And then she also goes on to say, what I think we educators are responsible the most is to facilitate our students with the tools, knowledge they will need to demand equity and claim their natural human rights.
Sorry, Katina, something I always, on that last comment, to demand equity and claim their natural rights. My siblings have kids that are in school, and I tell them, like, it is your right to understand how your children are being served. It is your right as a parent, as a community member, to know. And because I'd have my sister say, like, should I call the teacher? And because she said that this. Yes, you should. It is your right to know what's going on in the classroom. We are not perfect as educators, and I'm not saying we should harp on them and chew them up and spit them out either. But it's our right to know how our schools are functioning and make sure it's a good fit for my child.
Yeah. Now, let me ask this. Look, I'm going to ask Susanna and I'm going to ask Edgar. You tell me if this adage is common in the brown community. I know it certainly is in the Black community. Do as I say and not as I do. Have you guys heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I've had to tell elders in my community is that sounded good.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
It didn't.
We look at what you did more often than what you listen to what you said, because we realize that actions speak louder than words. So when I think about equipping students with the tools and the knowledge they need to demand equity and claim their natural human rights, who's modeling that for them?
Okay, I can't help it. So Montessori, I am a Montessorian, and it's going to come out. The beautiful thing about Montessori, and if you don't know anything about Montessori, call me. I can lay it out for you. But Dr. Maria Montessori was an Italian woman in Italy who was way ahead of her time and who struggled. But she came up with a philosophy and a method of educating young children. And she started with what's called the Children's House, which is poor children. She, the men did not think she was a woman. She wasn't supposed to go to school. She wasn't supposed to do any of these things. So she had to do it the way she had to do it. And she did a phenomenal job. It's 100+ years later, and that philosophy and method still stands. And the bottom line is her method, her philosophy and methods are built on universal principles, human principles, basic universal human principles. All her materials, everything universal for any child, no matter what cultural background you come from. And so that's the mindset that I come from. And yes, I have other degrees, but my Montessori degree taught me those basic things. And so when you're dealing with and educating children, my job is not to teach you anything. My job is to direct and guide your inner instinct. So, which is why when I teach or when I'm educating, whether I'm standing up or whether I'm down on the floor and I got all this stuff, because, you know, I believe in stuff. I think we should have stuff no matter how old you get when you get in high school. You should have stuff so that people can see what you're doing and you can touch it and make it real. That's a Montessori concept and other early year philosophies. But irregardless, even if I'm standing up in front of a classroom with just my whiteboard and my marker, I am incorporating things and I'm talking and I'm asking questions and I'm engaging the kids and I'm connecting with them and activating their knowledge. And they talk about these concepts in traditional education, but Montessori makes it real. And at the end of the day, when you're teaching, if you don't make it real for your students, they're not going to learn it. You want to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Make it real, make it meaningful. And that's with and that's with anybody, adults as well. But what I've learned so much, but that is one of the basic things that I've learned. Children carry within themselves the person that they become. They don't need, my daughter doesn't need me to come in here and change her mind about the person that she is and she wants to be. What she needs to do is tell me when my daughter says, "Mommy, I want to be a doctor." Okay, well, let me go about the business of trying to figure that. And when she changed her mind, okay, I want to be an artist. Well, okay, let me go about the business and it's not for me to say, hey, why would you want to be an artist when you can be a doctor? Or why would you? No. That's not my job, because she already knows the person that she becomes. And if she don't know it yet, she's developing it. So see, it's a mindset. We are all conditioned to think that these roles and these things are a priority. This is what's going to get you the most money, or this is what's going to make you happy or all this and any other. But that's not my job to tell a kid or anybody that. Mm-hmm. You already know. Yeah. And if you don't know, you have the ability to figure it out. My job is to guide that. And so, when you talk about equity and all those things, if you look at things from a universal standpoint, nature teaches us. If we pay attention, then we'll be able to guide our kids and get our kids to where they need to go. Because nature teaches us. But, when we get into politics and all the stuff that we have to engage in, and that's when our minds, oh, that looks good and all that there. But anyway, that's my soapbox.
I feel like every week that we've done this, we always end right about the time when you step on your soapbox and you deliver some really powerful words.
Yes.
So I always appreciate the last 5 minutes of our conversation, because I know Eric is going to come through with all this knowledge and wisdom. On that note, we are coming to the top of the hour if we're not already there. I want to make sure that we acknowledge that Elements of Education is doing an event. I'm going to do an overlay. Katina, why don't you go ahead and talk about what's coming up?
So we have a virtual brown bag discussion coming up on Thursday, April 30th, centered around this particular article that's on the screen. If you listen, we will stay. It is really the most comprehensive research around why education professionals leave the profession. And that's not just Black teachers, that's Black and brown, Asian, what have you. And so the article is such an easy read, and we're just going to get together on Thursday at noon, the 30th, and chew on it, discuss it, and actually validate it. That was a national study, but let's look at our immediate community around Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas. And are those reasons that are delineated in that article true for us? And then are the proposed solutions true for us? And then how do we manifest the recommendations so that we're recruiting, retaining, nurturing, growing, inspiring, supporting the educators of color, the education professionals of color? Mm-hmm. And I want to point out, when I say that, what I'm talking about is the cafeteria worker, the bus driver, the accountant, the superintendent, the principal, the paraprofessional, the nurse, the social worker. If you are an education professional, the administrative assistant, the registrar, the attendance clerk, the janitor, the librarian, if you are in the education space, you are an education professional. We could not exist without your role.
Yes.
You have to be a part of this conversation. I want us to get away from just talking about teachers, because it takes more than just teachers to make this thing work.
Absolutely.
So Elements of Education, we are generally geared toward African-American women in the profession. This particular event is open to any women in the profession. And men, if you want to jump on in too, come on with us. If you go to the Elements of Education Facebook page, you'll see all the event information there.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us for another conversation around the most pressing issues that are impacting educators of color and students of color. So we'll see you next week, Monday at 6 or 5 o'clock again, right?
5 o'clock. Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, guys.
Have a great night.
Bye. You too.